I just love watching students slowly open up. And a major thing that I was hearing from people joining like the drawing course or the basic design classes were that they are limited creatively. They can't draw or they can't do this. And no, it's just a matter of learning what to do. And it's so cool to see people come in saying, I can't, and then leaving saying, wow, I can. I never knew, it's a very exciting part of the process.
Hello, and welcome to From the Magic Pencil, Voices of Writing Through. My name is Kristin. I'm the Deputy Director of Writing Through, based in Siem Reap, Cambodia. And today I have the great pleasure of introducing our guest, whose name is Christie Pink. She also lives in Siem Reap, and she is an amazing graphic designer. She works freelance, but she also started her own company called Creation Haus and has done courses to teach graphic design to people around the world online. So one of the reasons why I approached Christie to do this podcast was because she did a presentation in Siem Reap about the importance of creativity. And it was so amazing, and it was so in line with what we believe here at Writing Through that I thought there is no one better to have than Christie on the podcast. So hi, Christie. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Hello. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to share.
Yeah. So, Christie, what inspired you first to do a presentation about creativity?
I've always been very excited about the topic of creativity and watching people grow in their creativity, me, myself, and also people around. And I know it's something that's so attainable. It's right there if you have the right mix and you're able to take breaks in various things. It's something that can really be nurtured. And I've heard far too often, I'm not a creative person, or this person has, this much creativity and this one just doesn't have that capacity. And I found that it's not true.
When somebody tells you that they're not a creative person, what's your reaction? What would you normally say to somebody?
I would say you might be surprised. I bet that you are creative. It's just a matter of having the open mind, kind of exercising yourself into an open mind to make more connections and different connections. Part of the problem is exactly what they just said. I am not creative. So it's a fear. And there's this fixation that happens when you're trying to think of new ideas and your mind gets afraid that it's going to think of the wrong ideas or not enough ideas. And then it just kills it. It kills the creativity. You have to have playfulness and curiosity in there. And I would suggest that that person is creative in probably quite a few ways whenever they're not expecting to be. And they may not see that as creative, but they probably make some connections that are not common for everyone. And they just don't know it,
Yeah, amazing. That makes me think of, so with Writing Through, we have 4 rules that we instill in our participants in every workshop. And the first one is don't think, right? Because thinking too hard is often a limiting effect on creativity, right? And I always bring it up because I do study psychology and neuroscience. That is my background. I'll never forget learning about how we make associations. So it happens all the time. If I'm trying to remember a name, or if I'm trying to remember something, if I'm trying too hard, it's like you have multiple hallways you can follow, but you get stuck down one and you're just banging your head against the wall because you're stuck there. And then later on, when you're doing dishes or you're doing something completely unrelated and you've stopped thinking about it, suddenly that name pops into your head.
That's right. Yeah.
Right? And it's so common when you're trying to think of an idea, you get yourself wrapped up in something and then you're not allowed to explore in that way.
Very much so. Yeah. It's just key to have the 2 different modes of thinking separate, convergent and divergent thinking, starting with the divergent where it's open, everything's open. You take away all of the stipulations and what won't work and why, and really just take in everything. And creating a safe space is so important too, or if you're in a group, because people obviously get even more fear around other people, but having a space just to dream, and then having another space where you're like, oh, okay, so what can we do and what can't we do? Let's look at all the ideas. And I remember reading one time that in Disney, they have these separate rooms. They have a dream space it is completely for dreaming. There is no rules or regulations in there, anything goes. And then you take it to the next phase where you're ready to start converging and like thinking about what could work and not. And it's just mind-boggling how we, no pun intended, how we try to cram both into meetings all the time and learning experiences. And yeah, it just could be amazing if we allow for a little bit of separation there and just dream first.
And do you
Play.
have a way that you do that? Like, do you have certain rituals for each of those components?
I'm still very much playing with all of that myself. When it comes to my own creative digging around and coming up with new ideas, my space is important where I am. It actually, the more chaotic, I guess it is, the better for me.
Really?
Yeah, like I mean, coffee shops are not chaotic.
But it's busy.
It's busy, yeah. For me, if I am coming up with some new idea, first I do a lot of research into the different components of this organization if I'm doing a branding or something like that. I look into all of the details behind, not pulling anything together, looking for new ideas yet, just getting the facts, getting all of the information possible. And then I take a break and just let all of that info kind of sink in, and maybe some connections are gonna be happening in there that I don't know about, I'm not trying for, and then I go into a space where there's energy around me, and that's usually a coffee shop, but I make sure my back is to the wall because I cannot work or draw and play or whatever with people watching over my shoulder looking at my screen. I haven't mastered that yet. I still am like, don't look at my stuff.
Yeah, you want it to be ready to show to people before people see it.
Yeah. But I know there is definitely an aspect too of being open and letting people have some say, give feedback, and that helps the process. It's just a matter of getting past the anxiousness of having people look at things that are not perfect, quote unquote, yet. Yeah. So being in a space where there's energy flow around me. I mean, I put in earphones, I'm not listening to anyone. I have music happening and there's people around me. And that kind of space really helps me to just open up and be creative and think of new ideas, new associations. But I also need to have the chance to stop and walk away multiple times. That's just how I work. And so it's very helpful to be a freelancer and to have the freedom to move around, because I find that looseness and schedule, the flexibility really helps me to kind of massage those new connections and come up with new ideas.
Yeah, cool. So that's in your kind of dreamer phase. What about when you're
Mm-hmm.
in your convergent
Convergent.
phase? What do you do to
Mm-hmm.
kind of differentiate that?
There can be two different directions: going to a new space, listening to a different type of music, something a bit more structured,
Mhm.
and really focusing in. I can also be home doing that. I find that kind of work I can do at home better, my home office space. I don't like to have too much energy happening around me at that point
Mhm.
in time. It's more like zoning in. And also, yeah, I don't get up and move around as much. Actually, now that I think about it, it's like I'm focused on the time frame a bit more and really just weeding out the things that aren't necessarily going to work. So it is quite a different workspace I give myself, I guess.
And that's so interesting because when you're dreaming and your ideas are floating and you're kind of brainstorming, you are surrounded in an environment that is similar to that. And
Mm-hmm.
then when you're honing in and you're quieting those ideas and selecting what works and what doesn't,
Yeah.
you're in the quieter environment. So even
Yes.
without maybe like actively thinking about that, it's so interesting to hear because in my mind it makes total sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And one thing that is a challenge for me, but it's a good challenge, is whenever I'm working on a project with a group of people and the necessity to bring in their feedback and to have them along the ride in the process, actually, and no surprise, but it opens up new possibilities and helps me to see things I didn't see before and go in different directions. But if I had a choice from the start, I would choose to work just by myself. And that's that fear part. I think, again, it's just a matter of being open and realizing that it's going to be a better process. Yeah, there's sometimes the client is like, just do what you want to do, I trust you, you do your thing, and then they just let me go through the process by myself. They're like, yeah, those are all good options. What do you think? Okay, so here's one I think is the best option. But whenever there's a client who really wants to be involved in the process and get feedback from other people in the company, it ends up being a better result because there is something they actually have in mind, a preference in a direction. Usually they just don't know how to describe it. So having them involved is actually a good thing.
And how do you deal with feedback or criticism when you've worked really hard and you love something you've created and they might come back with tweaks?
Oh, that's hard. No matter how many times I tell myself, this will not be precious. This is not precious. I go in hoping they're going to go in one direction often, but it's happened so many times that, a surprise feedback where I'm like, I know they're going to love this. And no, they don't actually. And it's very important that I'm not upset about it. And obviously to them, I wouldn't be, but inside even, I have to know, I have to be able to hold it loosely, because also it's my perspective, my idea, and is open-minded and creative. I try to be with it. It's still limited. When you let other people have their say and tweak things, you just get a better result. It might not look exactly how I was hoping it to, but it ends up being much more productive, more useful result for the client, which is important.
I ask this as someone who's very sensitive to criticism, and that makes me nervous to put things out there because I get my feelings hurt. Even if it's not a personal thing, I always get that kind of, oh
Yes.
no, they don't like it. They don't like me.
Yeah.
And that's something I think you need to get over. We all need to get over it.
Yes. Yeah. And one thing that I learned in design school was a fantastic program that I was in, really hardcore and gets you ready for, I'd say, just about everything. And then when you step out into the real world, it's not so bad. But there's still things that come up a lot. And I mean, one thing is whenever we would present our projects, you need to know why you chose these colors, this direction in the project, and have a good reason behind, because the client is going to ask, maybe, but at the same time, more likely actually is that they will just be like, well, how about blue instead? Or what if you throw this in there? And sometimes it's a good suggestion. It definitely helps you to see the mind of the client, but there's usually good core design principles that you've kind of put into play and reasons why you've chosen to do it this direction or another. And it's important to be able to explain that to the client. And it happens all the time with clients that they want to change something or don't understand why you chose this. But if you can explain yourself and have good reasons behind, then it's a process of educating the client in design as well. They don't know what you know. They're just seeing it from their perspective. And parts of that, like I said, are good and helpful for the process, but know why you're doing things, why you've made these certain choices, and be able to share that with them. So a lot of times I'll get the feedback, and some of it is, okay, yeah, I see why you prefer this direction, but this is why I did these things. And this is what happens in the mind of the viewer. So really having a solid understanding behind why you made these choices is really helpful, because sometimes the client is just, oh, I didn't think of that. It's kind of like a back and forth versus they say yes or they say no. It's definitely good and helpful for your own sanity whenever they just want to flip it on its head.
Yeah, definitely. Can you pinpoint or think of a moment in your life or education that helped to encourage you to follow this path and to foster your creativity?
I seem to have this interesting combination of liking to be creative, like pursuing creativity, but also liking a checklist. So I have found that graphic design really helps with both. It has the both sides of the thinking, I guess it is, where you have a moment of opening up and trying new things and playing and being curious. Like I like to draw, I like to craft things. And in those times, it's just a matter of just doing whatever I want to do with whatever materials are in front of me and having fun. But then with graphic design, there's that aspect, but then you have to narrow it down into key aspects that communicate for the client. Doing it as a freelancer with my own business, there's the whole admin aspect, and it's like this career choice really just fits me so well. And I'm really lucky to have found it early on, because I know that that's often not the case. So when I moved to Cambodia, one thing I was doing was working with an organization that had children's homes around the country, not an organization I'm with anymore. But at the time, a goal for me was to move here and start teaching graphic design. This organization was kind of, I had access to hundreds of children from age 5 to 25, and I would go and have creative camps at each of these provinces around Cambodia. There were 10 different homes that I would visit, and I would do a creative camp and just kind of watch the students and the way that they interact with the game or the craft. And it was amazing to me to be able to recognize the ones that were already open and more curious, more playful. They were artistic or crafty. There were some kids that just weren't interested. They would just do a little bit. And then it was just so interesting to me to be able to identify from the start the kids that I think could pursue a creative career. They're already in it. And that to me was really exciting. Like, I was initially thinking when I'm going to these places, how am I going to know if they're able to be graphic designers or if that's a direction for them? But it stood out so clearly to me. And then also to watch other of the children learning from their friends about how to be more creative, try new things, and it was just really an eye-opening process for me. Wow, this is something that really can be fostered and nourished, and the importance of connection, of us just like being connected together and reaching out. Yeah, it's just can go on and on. It's endless. It's so fun. It's a very cool thing.
And have you done those creativity camps anywhere else or only throughout Cambodia?
Only in Cambodia. So then I got involved in other things. I started doing graphic design, having design projects myself more often. And pursuing that, I kind of dip in and out of teaching roles, and it's in phases for some reason. That's just how it goes. But I do a lot of design work and client work, and then step out and start doing workshops or a course. I did a design course over COVID for a year, and that was so fun. I love it. I love teaching. I'd say that's a big passion of mine, and I'm currently still brainstorming about how to pursue the next phase of that. I love developing the curriculum according to what I learned, according to my experience now, and the way, of course, the world has changed and what's more applicable now versus then. So that was fun to put the course together and then watch it kind of reveal itself like in the students over that year. Oh, I just love watching students slowly open up. And a major thing that I was hearing from people joining like the drawing course or the basic design classes were that they are limited creatively. They can't draw or they can't do this. And no, it's just a matter of learning what to do. And it's so cool to see people come in saying, I can't, and then leaving saying, wow, I can. I never knew, It's a very exciting part of the process.
Well, we have that same feeling in the workshop. Like we always start our first session and say, at the end, you're going to stand up and read a poem that you wrote in English in front of an audience. Do you think you can do that? And so many of the students will say no. And then at the end, when they do it, that sense of accomplishment and pride is just unbeatable.
Definitely. I'm just glowing at the end of the class.
What do you think about, as you said, where we are now in the world with accessibility to things is so much higher? Like I use Canva daily, where I would have never been able to design posters and things like that a few years ago. Do you think that that is helping more people develop passion, or do you think that it's oversimplifying things?
Well, it's helping everything look a whole lot better. So that's nice, I think, in general, whether it's actually keyed into a specific client's needs or not is different, but at least it looks good. That's nice. I think the accessibility aspect of everything is just kind of the way it's gonna go, and it's a good thing if it's utilized well. one challenge with pursuing creative things or new ideas is there are so many directions to go and so many things at hand. You just got to take that step and actually look at something new. Just be like, okay, I'm going to read this book, or I'm going to join this class, or I'm going to walk to this place, or go to this event that otherwise wouldn't have interested me, just kind of putting yourself out there. Because another side of the accessibility is the social media and just the constant flow of everything and anything you could want. It's a bit desensitizing and numbing. When you're pursuing some creative direction, it can be, a bit intimidating. So there's that side of it. But then there's the fact that it's all there at your fingertips. Just make a plan and go with it. So I've been looking into AI recently, of course.
That's the big topic.
That's the big one. And it's exciting to see where that can go so fast. It's really an opportunity to have a fantastic thinking assistant. Immediately you can have access to all these things you'd have to look up yourself online and try to find these connections. But here you have an assistant who's already like laying out 10 of them for you. So there's a part of me that's like, so what part of our brain is this going to dumb down a bit? What part of this are we no longer going to have to use? Like, for example, phone numbers. I used to remember all the phone numbers I needed. Forget that.
I think I know
my
two
own
now.
Yeah. But it's going to do what it does. So let's see where that goes. In design work, I'm looking at all the ways to bring that in and to streamline my own process, while having exposure to even more. As usual, things are just moving faster. So let's see.
Yeah, it feels like it's lightning speed right now. Like, even from when AI first became the thing that everybody was talking about, you'd laugh at the fingers and the hands being so odd, but that's already finished. All those things that we knew to look out for in AI have been learned beyond, right?
Yeah.
So it's really interesting. We did talk a little bit about external critics. So when you have feedback from clients, what about your own inner critic? How do you deal with that?
For me, the curious, playful aspect is very helpful in that I try not to take things too seriously. And it's difficult. I'm a Virgo, so there's that side of me that's just really likes checking off things and getting it right, whatever that is. I think experience has helped just over time, seeing how everything works out in one way or another. It either becomes part of the learning process if it wasn't the way I wanted it to go, or it eventually got to the point. And I'm not always right. That's another thing I like to remind myself. It's just my perspective. I think having other people involved is always helpful in that, getting feedback, because you can really get wrapped up into your own mind too much, or I can. And then it's like looping, and you just need to step away and be curious. For me, it's just this constant need to back off from something and come back at it from a different perspective, whether that's 20 minutes or the next day. That helps me chill my inner critic, because I could definitely be pretty critical towards myself, of course. So for me, that's key for everything, for design work, for my own sanity, for my own just everything, relationships. It's just take a step back and take a break. We really like to go full speed and immediately have a resolution, and that's just most often not how it works, not how to get the best result.
If there's something that you would want to share with the world about creativity, what would it be?
I think a main point that I would share is that everyone can be creative, undoubtedly. And you probably already are, and you don't even know it. I mean, that's just seems to be a key takeaway that people don't realize. And I just want to shake them sometimes, like, yes, you can. Yes, you can. You absolutely can. There's just so much possibility with what our brains can come up with. And that also it's important to reach out to other people, to other interests, explore some things that you otherwise wouldn't have any interest in, and see what happens, because it's very cool. The connections that you can make in your brain, things that stick there, you don't know what's necessarily happening in the process. You're just experiencing. And then when you walk away, there's something that's been triggered. There's things happening that you don't know necessarily, and it'll come up later. So yeah, there's that. But there's one thing that I also was thinking, it's interesting, like the importance of reaching out. I was very much like I didn't go out a lot or have a lot of friends when I was a kid. Like my family didn't have much money or anything, but I really wanted to make stuff still. So I used a lot of materials around me to make toys, to make stuff. And I think a lot of introverts or kids who are bored and don't have a lot of exposure to other things even can become quite creative because they're making their own world. Like they're in charge then of using their imagination to create a world, to create these whatever it is, toys, etc. And so there's an experimentation that happens and a skill growth that does not happen when a kid just has access to whatever immediate gratification and this toy that they want to buy or something. There's just something that ends up, I don't know, I wouldn't say missing because they'll learn their own things, the kids who can get whatever they want. I'm saying exposure is important, but there's something to be said for growing up without too much exposure as well, when you have the desire still to create because you make your own world and you have to exercise your imagination in that direction. So there's a whole lot of creatives who grew up without a lot of exposure to things. They are so good at drawing and so good at focusing in on things because they were so curious when they were younger, because they had to be in order to not be dying of boredom.
I've heard a lot of discussion about that childhood now, boredom is being taken away because there's nothing to do. Here's an iPad, or I'll turn the TV on or something. And it's not giving chances for kids to create those imaginative worlds and galaxies and all this stuff that we used to do when we were bored as kids. Because what else did we have to do?
Right.
So it's an interesting thing where, it's great that you're able to give your kids educational videos to watch and games to play, but at the same time, there needs to be a bit of time for that kid to just be bored.
Yeah.
And entertain themselves.
Definitely. And like the mind wandering aspect of like the break mode in the design process, where you're divergent thinking, and then there's the break where the no thinking zone, and then the convergent thinking. In the no thinking zone, the mind wandering is like one of the best parts of it. If you can get yourself to that point. For some people, it's quite hard, apparently, to let your mind wander. For me, it's not hard at all. It just comes naturally, sometimes in the most inopportune moments, and often the ones who can do that more easily end up with more creative connections and ideas.
So do you think meditation is something that very creative people would find easier or more difficult?
That's a tough one. I can speak for myself. I don't think my mind wanders any more or less than anyone else's. From what I've heard, guided meditations and other people, friends' experiences, it seems to be a pretty common, straightforward challenge for anyone to kind of back out of the thinking, the constant and actually, I guess part of meditation is just accepting that it's happening, but viewing it from the outside instead, kind of like being a watcher of it instead of a participant. For me, it's not a big difference. It's not more challenging or less as a creative to do meditation.
I cannot.
No? Yeah?
No, I am not able to. I'm more of a movement person. So if I'm doing repetitive movements, that's when I can stop my brain completely. Like I'll just drift off and just be doing it. Or I always find my best ideas come to me when I'm either running or if I'm driving a moto, things pop into my head because I'm concentrating on other things. And that allows those things to kind of just drift to the surface a little bit.
Yep, definitely. And there's also apparently a zone of time right before falling asleep that is good for ideas to pop into your head. It's like right as you're drifting off, which is the worst time for me to go get a pen and tablet. It's like, and I know 2 nights ago there was some solution that had come to my head, and I was like, yeah, but I'm just gonna go to sleep. And I have no idea what that was.
Oh no. That is so funny you say that because it happens to me all the time. I have
Mm,
gotten up out of bed, opened my laptop, and written an introduction to a paper.
yeah.
Or I've actually written a poem and by phone with one eye open because it
Wow.
just came to me. And it's
Mhm.
the worst time ever, but I cannot sleep once it starts
Yeah.
because I just know this is what I need to do. And if I don't do it right now, it's going to be
Hmm.
gone. So
Yeah.
I'll try to sleep after that, but then it just bounces around in my brain. So it's better for me to write it. I have
Mm.
had a few where I have managed to go to sleep and then I wake up in the morning in this panic of what was it? What was I going to do? What was I going to say? What was I going to write? So frustrating. But interesting that it's not just me.
No. Yeah. It's frustrating that it's that time. Like, why does it have to be then? Right when you're about to enjoy a nice sleep. And for me, I don't sleep easily. I get woken easily, and then it's hard for me to get back to sleep. So when I'm drifting, I'm like, yes, bring on the sleep. I almost never stop and like will wake up and record that thought. Never.
Why couldn't that moment be right when you sit down at your desk?
Right.
Right?
Yes.
Right when I open up my laptop and I'm ready to start work, that would be the perfect time for all those solutions to pop in.
Hmm.
Oh, that would just be too convenient.
That's right.
Well, Christy, thank you so, so much for taking time out of your incredibly busy schedule to have this chat with me today. It's been so good. You're such a natural at explaining yourself and thinking and
Oh,
sharing your ideas and thoughts. And I really
uh,
do think that what you're sharing can help to inspire a lot of people and help them to push through those self-limiting things that we sometimes come
yeah.
across.
Thank you. Thank you for the opportunity to share. This has been fun. And yeah,
Good.
I hope people are inspired. I really hope so because there's so much potential, really.
Next month, we reach our penultimate episode. I'm joined by the Executive Director of Peppy Empowering Youth, Mr. Loic Mian. We have had the pleasure of working with Peppy for many years. They support rural students from outside of Siem Reap to continue their studies with both personal and professional training. Mr. Loic discusses the drastic career and lifestyle changes he made when he was younger and how he uses his creativity in his position as Executive Director, his personal experiences developing his skills as a photographer, and why he feels so strongly about inspiring young people to tap into their original, unique thoughts and ideas. Here is a little taste.
Creativity is with everyone. It's just like, do they have the opportunity to do the thing that they want to do, the thing that they are interested to do? And when they are in that zone, providing them with the tool to discover themselves is the way to propel that creativity to a much, much higher level.
I'd just like to remind you to please take a minute to rate, review, and subscribe to our podcast. It makes a big difference for our little project. Thanks so much for listening. Until next month, goodbye.